So I recently made this video about the Rugrats spin-off All Grown Up, and particularly an episode revolving around Angelica getting bullied. I'll leave a link to it down in the description so you can check it out if you want. Personally, I love how that video turned out, and it was an episode that was really interesting to approach because, like I talked about in that video, it wasn't very often that we would see Angelica portrayed as the victim in, well, any given situation. When she was, usually it was at the end of an episode as an act of karma. Every so often though, we would get an episode that would portray Angelica in a bit of a different light, and as a result, if you're someone like me who tends to be critical of her, your perceptions of her would likely be softened, at least minimally. In bringing up that point in that video though, I found myself mentally reflecting on more episodes that revolved around Angelica, specifically the ones that would increase your soft spot for her as a viewer. In all reality, looking back on the original run of Rugrats, those episodes were pretty few and far between. Especially early on, Angelica was a mean and nasty antagonist 9 times out of 10. However, today on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're gonna check out an episode of Rugrats that would see something genuinely kind of shocking happen to Angelica. Before we get into it though, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of my YouTube journey. Even you just clicking on this video and watching it to this point helps me tremendously. However, what would help even further, just in case you feel like going the extra mile for your friendly neighborhood YouTube giraffe, is clicking that subscribe button and the notification bell if you aren't subscribed already. The thing is, statistically speaking, a majority of you who stop by don't end up subscribing. Now, as someone who also enjoys YouTube, I totally get it. Not everyone who watches this has a YouTube account, and furthermore, even if you do, maybe you don't want to clog up your subscription box. I can't blame you for a second. Nevertheless though, I will promise that if you do end up subscribing, I'll make it worth your while with plenty of cool videos that'll bring you right back to the good old days. I mean, there's a good amount of people on here who have millions of subscribers, and for the sake of spreading a positive message, being able to share my creativity with you guys, and of course, providing for my wife and kiddos, I dream of being one of those people someday. So I humbly implore you to please consider subscribing if you haven't yet, and if you already are, thank you so much for your support. From the bottom of my heart, I genuinely appreciate you being a part of my YouTube journey. Today, things are getting super serious in the world of Rugrats. We're diving into none other than the Season 3 episode, Tricycle Thief. This episode starts out at a bicycle shop where we see Stu telling Susie's father, Randy, about this new age tricycle that will guarantee that Susie will be at the tip top of the toddler tricycle racing circuit. Randy, though, fails to see the allure, saying that he was hoping to find something maybe a little more traditional.
Anyway, Stu, I appreciate your bringing your inventor's eye along on this expedition.
My pleasure. I couldn't very well leave home without it, could I? That's funny.
Hey, Daddy! Look! Now that's a tricycle!
We cut over to Susie's house where we see her showing all of the bells and whistles on her brand new tricycle to Tommy, Chucky, Phil, and Lil. They're all just completely dumbfounded by how spectacular Susie's new ride is.
It's beautiful! Wanna sit on it? No, let's not get carried away.
Susie explains how it works to the babies, who are kind of confused by it. They're used to riding on things that their mom or dad push, but there's no handle on this contraption. The idea of being able to propel yourself on your own with just your legs is utterly fascinating to them.
That's amazing! Yep, you can go anywhere you want. Wow! Anywhere? Really? Even up the stairs? Or under the ocean? Or over the moon? No. More like anywhere in the backyard. Hey, Susie!
Angelica approaches, and of course, she's immediately very critical of Susie's tricycle, saying that it's crummy and stupid. She even goes as far as saying that Susie picked the worst color, despite the fact that, like Tommy points out, blue is Angelica's favorite color.
It's my old favorite. My new favorite color's polka dot. I hate blue.
Susie, I need a little room here to paint the shed. Why don't you take your bike over there?
Okay, I'll do it. Hey, give me back my trike!
Despite Susie's pleas for Angelica to stop, she speeds off on the trike, going as fast as she can. We see Angelica continue to rip through the yard until she comes to a rock that stops her right in her tracks, sending her flying over the handlebars and eating it directly into a puddle of mud.
Oh no! You broke my flictor! You're never gonna ride my trike ever again! Hey, Angelica looks like a giant mud pie.
So after that, we cut to the next day where Susie is outside building with blocks when Chucky and Tommy walk up to her. As Chucky stands by holding the string of a balloon that he got from the dentist today, Tommy asks Susie if he can try sitting on her trike. Susie is totally cool with it, of course, and she heads on over to the shed to get it for him.
Wet paint. It's gone! My tricycle is gone! Call the police! Call the army! Call me when it's over! Don't cry, Susie. Maybe you left it somewhere else. No! I put it in here like my daddy said to. Somebody stole it!
Tommy asks Susie who would do a thing like that, and none of them really have any ideas. However, Susie makes a vow that whoever took it is going to pay. As Phil and Lil start to get worked up as well, contemplating how they're going to make the tricycle thief pay, Tommy chimes in saying that they need to slow down for a sec before they end up doing something that they might end up being sorry for later.
Whoever stole my trike, they're the ones who's gonna be sorry. Hiya! You did it! Did what? You stole my trike! Just like yesterday. When you took it without asking. Angelica, how could you? I didn't steal your dumb old tricycle. Where'd you get it then? My daddy gave it to me. Where'd your daddy buy it? I don't know.
Simply based on Susie not knowing where her tricycle is, and Angelica not knowing where her dad bought the tricycle that she's riding, both the babies and Susie come to the conclusion that Angelica is, without a doubt, the tricycle thief. Phil and Lil grab her by the arms as they all contemplate what punishment they're going to sentence her to for her crime.
What are we gonna do with her? Cut off her pigtails? Make her eat spinach? Maybe we could just, let her go. Let her go? Sure, that's it. We'll let her go. But Cynthia stays. Hey! She's going for a little ride. Chucky, let go of the balloon. No!
Chucky lets go of the balloon, and it begins to slowly float away. But right at the last second though, Tommy demands that they stop, saying that they can't just do that to Cynthia based on what little evidence that they have. He argues with them, saying that there's a chance that Angelica is actually telling the truth.
Telling the truth? You mean like the time you told Tommy his new baby sister was coming in the mail? Well, or the time you told Phil and Lil that their daddy's hair was a wig. Or did he get mad when we tried to pull it off? It was kind of funny, though.
As they all continue to reflect on past lies that Angelica has told them individually, things look worse and worse for her. Susie tells Tommy that Angelica never tells the truth, and that means that without a shadow of a doubt, she took the trike to get back at her for yesterday. Just then, Angelica finally chimes up again, saying that she wouldn't waste her time trying to get back at Susie.
But yesterday you said... Go on, Chucky. What did Angelica say? Oh, nothing. What'd she say, Chucky? I don't remember. Tell us, Chucky. It's important. Well, Okay.
We then get a nice flashback from yesterday to Chucky's interpretation of everything that went down with Angelica crashing the trike. He explains that when they were all standing there and they saw Angelica crash, everyone else ran to check on her, but Chucky decided to run the other way to the bushes so that he could watch from a safe distance. They all started laughing at her and she walked away.
And that's when I heard her say it. You're gonna be sorry, Susie. She looked real bad. She did it. That's a final nail in the coffee. No, it isn't. Look, the flicker. It's not broken. So?
Tommy reminds Susie that yesterday when Angelica was riding the trike, she crashed it and broke the reflector. But this trike has a perfectly new reflector on it. This begins to lower the tension as Phil and Lil let go of Angelica, starting to realize that just maybe Angelica didn't steal Susie's trike.
She didn't do it! Told ya. Pops right off. Don't you see? She probably threw away the broken one and stole a new one from somebody else's trike. She's just gonna keep on stealing till she gets everything she wants. She did it. That's right. And we gotta teach her a lesson right now. Chucky, let the balloon go.
Yet again, Chucky lets go of the balloon, but Tommy yells for him to stop, wanting further evidence. He points out Susie's hands, remembering that when she opened the shed looking for her trike, she got red paint all over them. His logic is that if Angelica really did go into the shed and steal her trike, she would have red paint all over her hands too. Tommy proposes that they check Angelica's hands, and if they're clean, then they know that she clearly didn't do it.
It's finger paint. I was finger painting. She did it. She really did it. All right, Chucky, let the balloon go.
Chucky again lets the balloon go, but this time instead of Tommy chiming up, it's Angelica, who wants just one last chance to defend herself before they punish her. She admits that she may be mean and a bully, but she definitely isn't a tricycle thief. She says that she'll be the first to push you off of your trike or even crash it, but she would never steal it from you. Unfortunately though, Susie gets in her face, telling her that it's too late for talk now, and that she did what she did and now it's time to pay. For the last time, Susie commands Chucky to let go of the balloon.
Do it! Set me What have I done? Chucky, you didn't do nothing. Angelica let go of that balloon. She did? Yep, she let go of that balloon the minute she opened my daddy's shed and stole my trike.
After that, Angelica lies there crying her eyes out, and she says something that actually hits really hard. Through the tears and the weeping, she tells the babies that she feels really sorry for them. She feels sorry for them because whereas she only had to lose Cynthia once and experience that pain one time, they're gonna have to live the rest of their lives carrying the guilt of what they just did to her. Feeling extremely hurt by what just happened, Angelica confronts Susie, telling her yet again that she didn't take her trike.
For all I know, your trike could be sitting under your porch. Yup, there it is. What? My trike! But how did it get there? My daddy must have put it there when he was painting the shed.
At this revelation, the babies realize that they were all wrong and that Angelica actually didn't do it. Susie, however, is confused, saying that they caught Angelica red-handed. Just then, though, Angelica explains that she really was finger painting, as she hands over a picture that she made for Susie because she felt really guilty about breaking her reflector.
Why didn't you show us before? You didn't give me a chance. You were too busy ruining my life. Angelica, I'm sorry. Sorry? You're sorry? Sorry is gonna bring Cynthia
Angelica, in a rightful moment of anger after being wrongfully persecuted, yells at Susie for what she did to her, saying that she gets to have her trike back, but Angelica's never going to see Cynthia again. However, right at that exact moment, Cynthia falls from the sky and lands right on top of Angelica.
Cynthia! How did that happen, Phil? It's a miracle. Or a low-flying plane. Angelica, I'm glad you got Cynthia back. And I'm really, really sorry. Forget about that. Last move to the back fence is rotten egg!
Just like that, as the episode comes to an end, we hear Tommy talking with his friends about how they all learned a really important lesson today. And the scene zooms out as Angelica and Susie ride around the yard together, almost as if nothing had ever happened. Now, this episode is one that has always really stressed me out emotionally. I mean, the overall premise of this episode is one rooted in conflict and accusation, so it makes sense that this one would invoke really tense feelings naturally. Looking back at this one from the top, I have to give a bit of love to this crazy intro shot. In a ton of my videos about Rugrats, I've taken time to mention the way that the show's animators would begin episodes with extreme close-ups of everyday items to show them in a way that we aren't used to seeing, which as a result would usually mess with your perceptions of whatever it is that they were closing in on. In this case, it's items in a bike shop. I love the way that they do this because A, it makes for very interesting art, but also B, it kind of acts as a bit of a metaphor for the premise of the show. Rugrats completely revolves around babies and their perceptions of the world around them. Due to the fact that they haven't learned and haven't experienced the world around them very far or for very long yet, their perceptions can be very confusing to them as they can't necessarily decipher what exactly it is that they're taking in. These intro shots here are akin to that artistically for us as viewers, in my opinion. It's a warped and changed perception of usually an everyday item, however, we as viewers don't know what that item is. So with this close-up perception that we aren't yet used to, we don't really have any way to identify just what that thing is until we're given a different perception of it that we've learned how to perceive properly already. These intro scenes are just something so creative that I have a ton of appreciation for, and if you take them in at face value, sure, they're cool, but when we explore the potential for deeper meaning behind them, it really makes each and every one more and more interesting to digest. Next up, I wanted to touch on the sequence in the bike shop. I really do appreciate the way that as the show went on, they shied away from Stu being so obsessed with Randy Carmichael and being so weird about him. Like, I remember in the episode where Susie first moves to the neighborhood, the Pickles family comes over to visit, and when Stu finds out that Randy is a writer on his favorite show, The Dummy Bears, he starts being really weird towards him and starts asking him many questions about the Dummy Bears, even though Randy is very clear with his boundary that he doesn't want to talk about it. There definitely would be other times than that where Stu would kind of fangirl a little too much over Randy. However, over time, that would subside. And like in this episode, we would see the two interacting with one another like two normal people would, for the most part. It was pretty cool seeing Stu come to realize that Randy is just a normal dude and begin to treat him as such. Just because someone does something cool for work doesn't really make them any more special of a person per se. Moving along, I definitely wanted to take a second to talk about the baby's reaction to Susie's trike. It was just absolutely hilarious, especially Chucky. The way he called it bootyful, then when Susie asks if he wants to sit on it, he tells her, "Let's not get carried away." This whole line of dialogue was just so funny to me. The way Chucky said not to get carried away, just at the idea of sitting on the seat of the trike, was really just so Chucky. Only he would be that scared of literally just sitting on the trike and not moving. Furthermore, I got such a good kick out of how crazy intrigued and blown away the babies were by the idea of the tricycle just being a thing. Like, just at the thought of propelling yourself in such an advanced way had them so incredibly mind blown. This right here definitely epitomizes everything that this show is about. Their reaction to learning about something as simple as a tricycle is an excellent reminder that though things may seem normal and boring from your perspective, from a different angle or a different pair of eyes, those same exact normal things could be completely mind-blowing. Now, closing in on the actual meat and potatoes of this episode, I find it so obnoxious that Angelica had the gall to come up to Susie and completely roast her brand new tricycle, only to end up taking it for a joyride. Like, if it really was as stupid as Angelica said it was, then why would she have wanted to take it for a ride? I mean, it's very clear that she was just jealous, and she struggles miserably with sharing her emotions and feelings, but nevertheless, it was just pretty lame of Angelica to feel the need to be like that just because someone else has something that she doesn't have. With that being said though, I mean, just look at what happened with the situation. She ended up crashing the trike at full speed and breaking the reflector. First of all, well, that sucks. I get that Angelica deliberately jumped on the tricycle and took it without asking when she definitely shouldn't have. I get that her negligent actions ended up in Susie's brand new reflector getting broken. That was all super uncool for her to do. But the thing is, we need to consider that reflectors aren't expensive. They can be easily replaced, though the kids definitely don't know that. On top of it being minor damage though, Angelica crashing and face planting into the mud was kind of karma enough for what she had done. After she crashes, the babies and Susie all start laughing at Angelica and ridiculing her right after Susie just got done tearing her a new one for stealing her trike and breaking the reflector. I mean, I can't really blame Susie for a second for setting a boundary with Angelica and telling her that she's never allowed to ride her trike again. However, everything that happened further on top of that was just kind of salt in the wound, more or less. I will fully admit that Angelica completely shouldn't have taken Susie's tricycle for a ride without asking for her permission. But her having crashed, then subsequently being told she isn't allowed to ride it anymore, is punishment enough in my opinion. Screaming at her like Susie did, then mocking her while she's covered in mud though, is just a little bit too far. It honestly felt like way too much ridicule. The punishment didn't exactly match the crime, if you know what I mean. Now, in this context, I use that phrase as an idiom. However, as we saw, that phrase would become literal by the end of this episode. On that note though, it really bothered me the way that Susie jumped to think that someone stole her trike instead of taking even a second to consider that it could be somewhere else in the yard. Or maybe even just asking her dad if he had seen it. I mean, either of those things would have definitely saved Angelica from getting wrongfully persecuted here. All of this shows the danger of jumping to conclusions and throwing people under the bus. From the start, Susie didn't have any clear-cut evidence that Angelica actually stole her trike. However, she jumped to the conclusion that it must have happened just based on Angelica's character. From there, all it took was some minor, yet admittedly circumstantial evidence to get everyone convinced to want to throw the book at Angelica. Even Tommy, who had been standing up for her the whole time. Not only is it dangerous to do, because in doing that as an individual, you run the risk of an innocent bystander being wrongfully accused, but also when you as an individual have a tendency to work up others and get them rallied on your side, next thing you know, you have an angry mob on your hands who, again, might be after an innocent bystander that you are wrongfully accusing. All of this happened because of Susie adopting a spiteful mentality and being completely hellbent on getting revenge on whoever it was that she thinks took her tricycle. All the meanwhile, she does this without realizing that by conveying this kind of angry and vengeful type of energy, she was spreading it to others and working all of the babies up to want revenge on her behalf, even though Angelica hadn't even done anything to them. Speaking on the babies though, I definitely have to take a second to commend Tommy for chiming in and trying to be the voice of reason here. While Chucky was scared and everyone else was getting emotionally heightened, Tommy was the one person being mindful of the fact that when people are in that kind of emotional state, they are much more likely to do something drastic that they could end up regretting later on. However, despite him trying to be the mindful one, no matter how much logic he approaches it with, he couldn't win. The circumstances just weren't in either his or Angelica's favor, especially as far as the red paint was concerned, considering that this would be the nail in the coffin for her. All things considered, this extraordinarily highlights the danger of the same group of individuals playing the role of judge, jury, and executioner. When that's the case, things like this happen. Someone with an emotional bias ends up wrongfully punishing an innocent person based on something that could be potentially rooted in an experience irrelevant to the current moment. Like in this case, the current moment was focused on Susie's tricycle mysteriously not being in the shed. However, when Angelica shows up with the exact same tricycle, it's the emotions that Susie is holding on to from the experience yesterday that lead to her punishing Angelica for her trike not being where it's supposed to be. Though what happened yesterday is completely irrelevant to the whereabouts of Susie's tricycle today. The tough part though is that we have to acknowledge that sometimes it actually is the case where the person in question is guilty, of course. However, the point at hand is that it's extremely important to make sure that you have actual evidence before we start hurling accusations and trying to punish people before they're proven guilty. I definitely have to point out really quick that one of the most frustrating parts of all this is the fact that this is very much so out of character for Susie. Don't get me wrong, there are times in the early seasons where we see her getting overly emotional or being kind of manipulative towards her siblings or parents, but like in general, especially as far as interacting with her friends goes, Susie is almost always pretty calm, cool, and collected. She may have a tendency to get fired up over things that she's very passionate about, but like usually those things make sense. For example, defending her friends. Susie's a good person, so yeah, when she sees Angelica picking on the babies, she's definitely gonna get a bit elevated in an effort to stop her. But like, seeing Susie get very elevated over her trike being stolen and accusing, then straight up punishing one of her friends for it just felt very extreme, and honestly, it didn't feel like the Susie we all know, if you ask me. Another thing in this episode that really struck me at my core was the amount of disappointment in Tommy's voice and the shock on his face when he found the red paint on Angelica's hands and finally was convinced that she was guilty. This natural reaction, in my opinion, was because his gut was telling him that Angelica didn't do it. One thing we can say for certain is that Tommy's gut is pretty much never wrong. He's generally really good at reading people and being able to rely on his gut in most situations. For him to be wrong about something like this would definitely be a shockingly devastating revelation, and one that might change the way that he thinks about people and looks at people forever. I mean, he saw how Angelica was talking, acting, and he took into consideration the substance of the words that she was saying. The obvious conclusion to someone like him who has a trustworthy gut instinct and a clear head at this moment is that Angelica is not guilty. But that sinking feeling of finding the paint on her hands was enough to rock his entire world and start to question the one thing he possesses that he's been able to rely on almost more than anything else. Outside of Tommy though, I can't help but worry when I think about the trauma that was buried deep into Angelica's early developing brain at this exact moment, having experienced all of her friends turning on her and doing something so damaging to her. During that scene when Susie demands that Chucky let go of the balloon, and he finally does once and for all, the tears that Angelica cries are deeply real ones, coming from a place where she knows that she's been deeply wronged over something that she did not do. The pain she felt in that moment was honestly really heartbreaking. Angelica has a very special bond with Cynthia, a bond that she's had since she was really young, and one that would continue all the way through her teenage years. The fact that Susie would want to destroy something like that, A, is just incredibly hurtful, and B, is, again, uncharacteristically spiteful for Susie as a person. Hearing the way Angelica cried, and the comment that she made about how they're all gonna have to live with their actions for the rest of their lives, meanwhile she'll get over losing Cynthia eventually, was just a bit much. Like, I can't put it into words, but the anxiety that this whole chain of events made me feel when I was a kid is just piercing. I mean, no wonder I have such a deep instilled fear of being wrongfully accused of a crime. I grew up seeing stuff like this that made me worry that if someone accused me of a crime, everything that I loved will be tied to a balloon and immediately sent to Mars without a proper trial. In all seriousness though, this episode is one that really leaned into heavy emotions, which for a show like Rugrats wasn't all too common. A lot of this show was very lighthearted and positive for the most part. When they did lean into heavy emotions though, it always had a lasting effect. This episode in its entirety shows just how important it is to step away and take some time to cool down after emotionally tense things happen. We see this sentiment shine through in a few different areas of this episode. First of all, Angelica steals Susie's tricycle, ended up crashing it, and, well, you saw what happened. Angelica was angry about it, and as a result, she made a really nasty comment about how she was gonna make Susie pay. Then, the very next day, after some time had passed, and Angelica had the opportunity to not only think about what happened, but also reflect on her own actions, she ended up feeling sorry about breaking Susie's brand new reflector. Then, as an apology, she sweetly finger painted a picture for Susie. All it took was some time to cool off and some self-reflection for Angelica to realize that she was the one in the wrong in the situation, seeing as she was the instigator after all. Meanwhile, Susie, on the other hand, had a few emotionally tense things happen to her along the way too. Her brand new tricycle got crashed, resulting in a broken reflector. Then, the very next day, she goes looking for that same tricycle to find it mysteriously not where she had left it. From there, she gets very heated and emotions get tense. Instead of stepping away and maybe taking some time to cool off, she reacted immediately and swiftly to seek justice upon the person she suspected, despite lack of concrete evidence. The tough part is that if Susie had taken time to step away and maybe just take a deep breath, she likely wouldn't have ended up acting in a way that seriously hurt one of her close friends. Odds are she could have taken a breath and had some time to clear her head, which would have given her time to realize that she should probably ask her parents if either of them had seen it, and in that case, everything would have been just fine. Ultimately though, there's one big factor here that kind of makes this one a little bit difficult to digest as a brand new viewer who's never seen it, and that would be how we truly don't know if Angelica really took the tricycle or not. Like, we obviously saw exactly what happened in the first day of this episode. Then on the second day, the tricycle is just gone, and the babies are completely confused, as well as us as viewers, because the show's writers also leave us in the dark as to the tricycle's whereabouts. For all you know as a new viewer, Angelica definitely could have stolen the tricycle. However, if you look back at this episode in hindsight, you might notice a few times where the tricycle can be seen underneath the deck, kind of foreshadowing the ending a bit to those with a keen eye. On that note though, how cool is it that this is one of the few episodes where the small details actually mattered? As far as Rugrats is concerned, the production team usually doesn't pay way too much attention to those things. But this one literally revolves around the small things like the placement of the tricycle on their property and the fact that Chucky wasn't there when everybody ran to check on Angelica after crashing. It's one of those where, like, in that moment, you don't realize that Chucky wasn't there, but after it's pointed out, you're like, huh, he wasn't there, was he? I, for one, really enjoy episodes like this, where a show that has never really emphasized the small things takes the time to do that a bit and show that they really can foreshadow with the best of them. In conclusion though, I can't think about this episode and not ponder just how tough of a situation this is. Like, when we look at the big picture, Susie's tricycle is seemingly missing. Then, all of a sudden, Angelica, who had just one day before made an ominous threat towards Susie, has the same exact one? At face value, we can all obviously realize why everyone would think that Angelica did it. But the real point behind all of this here is that ultimately, if they would have just taken a moment to deeply analyze their evidence, and give Angelica a chance to fully defend herself instead of steamrolling her into punishment, it would have been easy to tell that her being guilty just simply wasn't the case. Sure, based on Angelica being how she is in general, in combination with how she behaved yesterday, it's hard to blame them for immediately thinking she was the one who took it. However, that doesn't make what they did to her in this episode okay for even a second. But what do you guys think? How did this episode make you guys feel? Please let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. There's just something about seeing your guys' take on the episodes too that puts a huge smile on my face. And of course, I also want to take a quick second to give a massive shout out to my friends over on Patreon, especially those of you in the true 90s kids tier. Thank you all so much for helping dreams come true. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and maybe give some praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this one to everybody else. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.